please welcome the incredibly talented Natasha Willis.
Thank you so much for having me, Renee. I've been so excited about our convo since you have had many of my clients and friends, just people that I know in all the different circles, that you've known for a long time as well on your podcast. And I can't wait for our convo. It's going to be a blast.
Yeah. Well, we both have neon signs in the back.
Love.
I'm actually, yeah. I'm changing mine to the name of my podcast because We Wild Women is the name of my business.
Yes.
People kept getting confused. So we got the new neon lights. They've been sitting in a box for a while and we will mount it soon enough.
It will happen. Funny enough, I'm in the same boat. After I bought this one, I was like, these neon signs are great. And I found this company I really liked. So I bought 5 more of them and they've been sitting in a box also in my conference room for the last 2 months. I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to put them. I should have thought about that before I ordered all of them, but here we are.
What we're trying to do, my parents are visiting. My dad's like the MacGyver of all things. We're going to mount it to a board so that we can actually move it around if I need to travel or whatever.
Smart.
Then it's, the background comes with me.
Yeah, that is so smart. Years ago, not to veer us down a rabbit hole, but one of the most brilliant things that I think I had seen at a conference was years ago, I was at Traffic and Conversion Summit in San Diego. I think it was 2018 or 2019. And Ezra Firestone was there doing all this video content that he was essentially going to publish over the coming year with all the conference speakers, which in itself, I was like, this is so smart. And now, so many people try to do that. But when I went to go and film with him, he had rented out one of the hotel rooms in the same building. And he brought all of these different signs and crazy wooden walls and pretty much just put them all around the little seating area in the hotel room. And it looked amazing, like a set, that was high production. So it's definitely a brilliant move to do that when you can and bring it with you.
Yeah, I think this was the test for me. And now we're just trying to figure out what type of board to mount it to. But anyways, going to Home Depot with my dad. I think we figured it out. But anyways, besides the neon signs, you are in a really interesting industry. How did you get into it?
Yeah, I love how you framed that because you're so right. It is the more time I have spent in it, the more I have realized how niche it is, but also how broad it is as mainstream has really picked it up over the last, I would say, 2 years. But I got into this kind of by chance because I was about to go into college for my first semester. And a friend of mine, along with a few other things that I'll share in a moment, but a friend of mine I had seen was talking about this concept of DM marketing and using the DMs, messaging apps for marketing purposes as a business. And it was still pretty new at the time. This was in 2016. And then later that year, Mark Zuckerberg announced how Facebook Messenger was opening up this feature to pretty much anyone who wanted to build on it. And they were the first messaging platform to really allow for this, the one-on-one, not just broadcast channels and that kind of thing. Telegram has had those for a long time, but actually being able to message people automatically to give them what they want, when they want, how they want. And so that kind of lit up something in me where I realized, okay, this is a new marketing thing. I really want to learn marketing because I've known I wanted to be an entrepreneur for a long, long time. My dad, one of the last things he said before he passed when I was 7 was, I don't want to die an employee. I want to become an entrepreneur and actually start my thing. And he did, even though he passed a couple months after he started his business. And that, I didn't know that he had said that until years later, but that always stuck with me. And I was like, I know that entrepreneurship is my path, but I have no idea how I'm going to do it. What's the first step for me? And so this ended up being my first step. I was like, hey, to my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, let's give this a chance and just see what the hell happens. It could be either it crashes and burns and nothing happens with this, or because Meta's taking a bet on it and they have the most consumer data in the world when it comes to how people want to behave and act and consume and interact with brands and each other online. They're taking a bet on this. Maybe we should too. So took a semester to be at college while kind of figuring out what this business was going to look like, and then decided to drop out the following semester in the spring. And I had already bought a ticket to Hong Kong because I was supposed to do 1 semester in Los Angeles, 1 year in Los Angeles, 1 year in Hong Kong, 1 year in Italy. And then I could pick which of those I wanted to end my bachelor's degree at. I was in this unique, interesting program. Yeah. So I said, well, look, I already bought my plane ticket to Hong Kong, can't get a refund on it. So I think, I want to leave the country and do this whole digital nomad, Tim Ferriss, 4-hour work week kind of lifestyle and see what I could do. And I was like, if you want to come with me, you have to read the 4-hour work week and we can do this business together. So we ended up agreeing on it. And that was the essentially genesis of this whole journey of figuring out what this business is going to look like, how we could actually add value to businesses with this whole new technology. We had no idea what we were doing. And we also got to spend a lot of time together because now we were like living together, running a business together, traveling together, and we were isolated, as we're moving around all these countries in Asia and Australia and Mexico while we're trying to get this off the ground. So the result of that ended up being we made about $100,000 the first year, which I was absolutely mind blown. That was the most money I had ever made. And from there, it just started to snowball because looking back, I feel really lucky in a sense that we chose this, even though it was a big bet and there was no data to back this up necessarily, like what this was going to look like, because we ended up being able to ride the market trend as it started to become mainstream. And then it ebbed and flowed a little bit as people were like, oh, this is amazing. Okay, now we're on to the next thing. And then it kept coming back though. So what's been interesting over the last 7 years is that it's been consistently up and to the right, but it hasn't been, hockey stick growth every single year. So the last year, I would say the last 12 months specifically are where we have seen the most mass adopted growth because of Instagram and everyone testing it out on Instagram. So I'll leave it at that, but that's a little bit of the backstory and kind of how we got to where we are.
Okay. And then the thing that you do is DM funnel.
Yeah. So we've named it many things over the years, trying to kind of figure out what helps people really understand what it is that we do. Because at the end of the day, we help companies grow their revenue and their leads, whether that's email lists or phone numbers, through messaging apps like Facebook Messenger and Instagram. So specifically how we describe it now is that we create automated back and forth conversations that help turn your scrollers or your followers into customers from organic content. And then we also do stuff with ads, but organic is really the biggest untapped opportunity.
So I use ManyChat. Is that what this is? Is this an example of what it is?
Yes. So ManyChat is an example of what this is. And it is one of the core tech platforms involved in what we do. One of the biggest kind of marketing messages that we are creating and working on right now is that everyone thinks, oh, I use ManyChat. I know what this is. I know it all essentially, right? And there is so many other layers to untap when it comes to what you can actually do with this. Most people right now hook up ManyChat to their Instagram account and then have a simple automation where if you comment on their post, let's say the word podcast, then they might send you the link to one of their podcast episodes, and it ends at that. And so there are so many more layers that we can add to that to actually take someone from that initial comment to becoming a lead, becoming an email on your list, becoming a customer, becoming a repeat customer, upselling, downselling, nurturing, so that is what we have become really good at when it comes to the automation specifically, and also being able to bring in humans when it makes sense.
Okay, so for listeners, if you comment number 293 on this post on my Instagram, it will trigger the automation from ManyChats. And essentially, I'm just sharing the YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes link to tune into this episode.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much as far as I've gotten. And listen, I'm proud of myself because we do this for every episode.
Yes.
And I know there's so much more to unpack. So this is probably a very basic approach to doing this. How complex do some of these automations get?
Yes. So the way I think it's helpful to think about this from the business owner perspective is think about all the tech platforms in your business. So let's say that you run an information business where you sell courses. So you might have your landing page software, maybe ClickFunnels. You might have your email marketing platform. Let's say it's ActiveCampaign or maybe MailChimp. And then you have maybe a webinar platform where you like to run webinars on either Evergreen or a couple times a year live. You want to have people show up to these classes and then people buy your courses as a result. So those are 3 tech platforms right off the bat that can be integrated with ManyChat so that all platforms are talking to each other so that, for example, when you are in the DMs, what you could do, before you give someone the podcast episode is you could say, hey, real quick, I'm going to pass over the episode. I can't wait for you to check it out because Natasha and I broke down some really incredible advanced strategies. But if you want to get notified when the next episode comes out, be the first one to know, just drop your email. If not, no worries, just type skip and I'll send you over the episode either way. So now what you're able to do is collect 40 to 70%. That's usually the range in which we collect there, depending on how good you frame the offer. 40 to 70% of these people who comment actually give you their email at that point. And then now you can say, and here's the episode link now. So you've now added a ton more people to your email list while still adding value to them. And it's a win-win-win. The third win, in addition to you and the user, is that Instagram likes this because you're keeping them on the platform for a little bit longer. And you never had to take that person to a landing page to go and opt in. So that is one example of many that we'll probably get into over the course of this episode when it comes to how you can just add more layers of integrating your tech platforms to help people get closer to becoming a customer or just get them more embedded into your community.
So you said ClickFunnels, ManyChat, and what was the third one?
Active Campaign. And your webinar platform. Just giving the example like tech stack, if let's say you sell courses and you've got your landing pages, email software, maybe webinar software.
So that's the part that also intimidates people the most.
Yes.
So like ManyChat for me was pretty intuitive, and to actually get it to work was relatively easy. But
I'm happy to hear
where it's complicated is now you're connecting all these other things.
Yes, exactly. And that's where people tend to get hung up. And it makes sense. And in terms of kind of the best way to look at it is you don't have to know any coding, and you can either, go to YouTube, find tutorials. I talk about this all the time in my content in terms of how you can approach this. You can also talk to ChatGPT and be like, hey, if I'm using Active Campaign and ManyChat, how should I best connect them? Like there's so many tools I think now available for business owners to be able to figure it out. But 100%, it's like anything. It's like starting a podcast, right? It's like you could go and watch all these videos and all these things, but it's really intimidating sometimes to just do the dang thing and, make it happen.
Pick one and go with it.
Yep.
We're on episode 293 and we're leveling up this year.
Yes.
And so I was talking to my producer, editor, about changing our publishing platform. And he's like, at this point now, you pretty much just got to keep what you're using because you have so many episodes. And I'm like, darn it.
Yeah.
I didn't know new things come about, and just hoping that the technology we're using keeps up to date. But that tends to be like one of the biggest draws. Like not only is it, how do I connect these things? Now it's people adding up the cost. Who's going to manage this? So there's a lot of people and structure that go into this. So for smaller teams, what is your recommendation on how to set this up and manage this?
Yes. So one of the best pieces of advice I can give people is to either find somebody to build this for you or get support/coaching as you build the first one if you want to go fast. Now, let's say that you are under $10,000 a month in revenue, then I wouldn't even consider building out an automation until you know for sure that people are buying your stuff consistently. I think it's really important to actually go back to like the decision framework of when should I implement certain tech in my business? Because as you've probably found on your journey many times, and all the people who have been on this incredible show, like we all have gone through the journey of realizing if I were to do things back over, I'd probably do them in this order instead of this order. And when it comes to ManyChat / any kind of DM automation tech, since there are other platforms involved too, but ManyChat's the first place to start, and probably the best thing we should talk about here, is that you want to use it on things that you've already somewhat proven. Now, on the other side of that, let's say you have an established audience. Let's say you have 100,000 followers on Instagram, or like a community where you're like, there's at least a couple hundred people who care about me and like what I have to say. So if you were like, I want to use this to launch the first of my products ever, I've only done brand deals or affiliate stuff until now, like I want to launch my own thing for the first time, then doing a simple automation would be the best way to do it, because that's going to give you data for how many people actually are going to opt in. That is one of the worst feelings when you build something, takes you weeks or hours, and then you launch it and nobody opts in. So it's important to test out like how much traffic, and then if you do get traffic, are you sending them to proven offers, stuff that people have already opted in for free, or stuff that people have bought from you already. And if you have those things, you have consistent traffic, which we can talk about like metrics and benchmarks. You have a free thing or a pay thing that people have already opted in for and told you is valuable, then this can become the next step for you to monetize your content more effectively.
There's another tool that I use on my phone called Boards.
Boards.
That's where I started. So it's an app called Boards, which allows you to create content that you can connect to your keyboard. So then instead of like retyping or cut and pasting the same thing over and over again. So this is like just below automation because you have to manually put it. But before I paid for anything, you can use like a free Boards account. It allowed me to write in the content, add, images, links, I think even attachments. And I just pressed the little world button on the bottom and I could click on the content that I've already written. It automatically populates it into the DMs.
So almost like saved messages of, okay,
it is
I'm
saved
in Instagram DM. Yeah.
And it was the best way to get started because you can get a free account. And what it also does is because it's not automated, and maybe they have the functionality for it, but because it's not automated, it really forces you to engage with these people. And if you're just starting out, maybe you don't have the finances or the team to do this, it's a great way for you to get to know the people that you're chatting with. Yeah. So then I went from this, tested that out, loved it. And I was like, okay, I know my people want to hear from me. So now we're going to automate this. And that's been awesome. I just do it for my podcast. When I was actually promoting other content, I would do that too. The key is though, and this is just my experience, is when you have trigger words, because you can set up ManyChat trigger words for like comments or DMs, don't use common words.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Because don't use common words. Because I said a long time ago, I set up an automation for the word pitch, which is what I use a lot in the world of PR. And like, it would automate and I would kind of joke, haha, I guess I should turn off that automation. People thought it was funny, but anyway. So actually maybe we can double click on that too, because this is kind of like the basics. I know there's some people that are doing this. But when you're getting started and really getting going, what are like the 101s of DM funnels?
Yeah. I love that you mentioned that because that makes me want to share just a quick framework with everyone because this is one of the ingredients we can talk about. So the first thing might be, okay, I have something that I think people will care about that I've already maybe been posting about or that I want to launch to my existing audience. How do I first pick the word that I'm going to use? So we follow a framework that we've devised over 100 million plus messages that have been sent now, over 15 million opt-ins across over 3,000 accounts now, anywhere between 7,000 followers to 45 million followers has been the biggest. And what we find perform the best is yes, not words that might be common to your audience, but in addition to that, 7 letters max, ideally. A word, not a phrase. So let's say, for example, if you were going to use the word deals, you might not say big deals. You'd say, hey, comment deals. Easy to spell. An exact word that's related to your business. So it doesn't have to be something that is completely different from your business. It could be an acronym of your product or just something that is related. Like for you, it could be comment wild, for example. And then finally, the T is to make it speedy for users. Avoid special symbols and emojis. I do see this more often than not lately where people, I saw one the other day, not to call anyone out specifically, but he was using a chair emoji. I don't know anybody who uses a chair emoji commonly enough for it to be in their like top recommended emojis. I would have to type in the word chair.
Unless you own a furniture store, maybe.
Right. And so this kind of obscure emoji, might be an inside joke or something that's relevant to his very like loyal, deep audience, but 99% of people, especially if you're always trying to reach new audiences with your content, are like, that is way too much work. I'm moving on to the next thing. So again, just to recap, sweet 7 letters, word, easy to spell, exact word that's related to your business, and then make it speedy for people. Don't include special symbols like the $sign and then emojis as well.
Assuming then, do you go back to the automation and delete it after you're done with that certain thing?
I love you asked this also because no, we never do that. What you can do is redirect people to a different message. So inside of ManyChat, once you've decided on your word, you say, hey, when people comment on my post, which we should later in this episode talk about all the ways people can trigger this. That would be, I think, really useful to people. But after somebody comments on your post, you can then send them, let's say, let's say that you were running a Black Friday deal. And so it's only up for 4 days. After those 4 days, we don't take down the trigger word from the caption or delete the post or anything like that. We leave everything as it is. And inside of ManyChat, you can redirect the message to a different message so that when people comment, you could say, darn, you missed the Black Friday sale, but if you want to get on the wait list for our upcoming holiday sale, just drop your email and we'll let you know when, that opens up. You'll get an extra 10% off, blah, blah, blah. So that's one way that you can do it. So you're always leveraging that trickling traffic that's going to be coming in from seeing all your old posts.
Okay. So the word pitch, going back to talking about this, is I deleted it because it was overused. I could have just gone back and redirected people.
Yes, when you say it was overused, tell me more about that. What was the thing you were driving people to?
I think it was, I don't even remember, but I'm assuming it would have been a lead magnet.
Okay, gotcha. And you didn't like the word because you found people were commenting it on all your posts in different ways, or?
No, it was in DMs. We're just chatting about, hey, I pitched so-and-so, and I was like, oh no. And it's like, and it would send all the things.
Okay, so it wasn't from a post. It was like people just typing it in a message.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a good segue if you're up for it, where we can kind of talk through all the different ways.
Let's do it.
So commenting on a post, that's where we usually get 70% of our traffic. So that is definitely the number one place to start if you are just beginning this or wanting to scale it up more. But the second way is getting people to DM you a word. And two of the easiest ways you can get people to DM you a word, actually three, would first be from a podcast episode like this. I could say, hey, DM me wild and blah, blah, blah. All right. Second, you can tell people in your bio to DM you the specific word. Lots of people do this. 95% of them, if I could take a guess, just because I opt into like every single time I see one just for funsies. But most of the time it is not automated. It's an actual person. So you don't get an automated response. And the third would be on a story. If you say, hey, like for example, when this podcast episode comes out, I'll do a story, say, hey, I absolutely love my conversation with Renee. We talked about blah, blah, blah. If you want to get the link to the episode, DM me the word wild or reply wild to this story. So those are three of many different ways that you can use that DM trigger. Now, the thing that I would guess if I were to look at your ManyChat right now for that specific word was that the setting you chose may have been message contains the word wild. I'm sorry, contains the word pitch. And so there are 4 or 5 different settings now that you can pick from. Some of them say if the message only says the word pitch, if the message begins with the word pitch, and then there are a few others that are more nuanced. So if you were to go back and change that, that most likely would have prevented it.
Okay. Well, that's it. I don't even think I deleted it. I probably just turned it off. That makes a lot of sense. So I can go and update that.
Exactly.
So all these little nuances. Okay. Learning a lot. This is so cool. But I did want to talk to you about something that's on my mind in the world of automations. I feel like because it's a low barrier to entry, it's pretty intuitive. It's not that expensive. ManyChat is a perfect example of how easy it is to use the software. Is it starting to be overused? Are people getting tired of this?
Yes. So the biggest mistake I see people make is that they use it on all their posts or more than 50% of their posts. What we have found in testing a lot of different cadences is that you first want to have 3 to 5 words that you're rotating through. You don't want to just have one word that you're consistently using every single day, every single week, every single month. And there are many ways you can go about doing that, even if you don't have multiple offers. The second thing is that you want to use it 30% or less of the time. So the goal of automation and leveraging it in a way that is useful to both you and your audience and new people who are finding you is that you want to protect the community aspect of Instagram when it comes to having genuine discussions in the comments. If every single comment section on every single one of your posts has a specific word in it and that's it, there's no genuine conversation happening, that's where it starts to become overused or, quote unquote saturated. Now, in terms of how we kind of follow that cadence, we typically follow a rule of 3. Whether you post 3 times a week or 3 times a day, is that the first post in whatever order you're doing is going to be your comment call to action. Your second post could just have an engaging question in it, like, hey, what do you think about this? Or what's the best advice you've been given? Or whatever have you. And then the third post has no call to action. Those posts, they may feel scary for some people to post, but the reason why they're helpful is because then you can see, was your content interesting and valuable and shareable enough that it still got comments, it still got shares, it still got saves, right? Even though you didn't tell people to do something specific there. So that's typically the rule of 3 that we'll follow on all size accounts that we work with, 7,000 to 45 million followers. And it's performed the best for us so that audiences don't get burnt out from you constantly saying comment on every single post.
Okay. So it's what were they? DM, call to action, and then nothing?
Yes. So the three are the comment, call to action, then an engaging question, and then no call to action.
Ooh, this is so good. How do you figure this stuff out? Is it just by like trial by fire?
Yes, lots of blood, sweat, and tears and breakdowns over 7 years.
Right. I bet. Like, you can't just know this stuff by not doing, because you've worked with some incredible names in your bio. Russell Brunson, Jenna Kutcher, Amy Porterfield. Like, this is incredible. So you know what you're doing. And how many million messages have you sent so far?
Yeah, so we hit 100 million messages sent, I think, earlier this year. And then that's resulted so far in $70 million in sales. We're probably closer to 80 now, but we like to do an annual kind of roundup. So we'll see where we are by the end of the year.
No, sales for your clients?
Correct. Sales for our clients.
Okay.
Yes.
The $70 million funnel. Okay. So what are some really cool stories? What are some like big home runs that you've had? I'd love to hear this.
Yes. And I was telling you before we recorded, I was like, look, we have so many big names, big content creators and people, but while that can be very inspirational and motivational for people, it also can feel very unrelatable. So one example that I love to share is, and I saw that you had several of her friends on the podcast. I don't know if you're connected with her at all, but Elizabeth Benton. She was a client of ours who started, this was last summer, so about a year ago from when ish we're recording. And she started on her Instagram account, was getting decent engagement, but nothing crazy. And the format wasn't super valuable, super shareable for people. So there were two big changes we made. And this is a key part of the like overall formula is, of course, the content has to be good, but it has to be what people want to consume, how they want to consume it. Yeah. So we made a shift to how she was presenting her content while also launching her first funnel. The first funnel was a free download, but also, like I was telling you, you can do more stuff once somebody's in the conversation. So the second, what we would call an invitation, was we first invite people, share your email, you'll get this free guide. The second invitation we gave people was to a $1,500 product. And so what happened in the first 24 hours is she had over 700 comments on the post. And something we didn't talk about is you can also, when someone comments on your post, send them an automated comment response. And maybe you've seen this, or people who are listening have seen this, where it's like, hey, I just sent it to your DMs. And there's a whole art and science to picking, what goes into that comment. But long story short, then you divide that 700 comments by 2. That's the number of leads that came in to her DMs. But through that process, she collected almost 400 emails in the first 24 hours and made $15,000 in sales in the first 72 hours. And then I think 5-7 days later, she ended up hitting 25K in sales. So that was the first one. Here's a fun thing. She only had 23K followers at the time. So this was a huge home run for her, because you expect these things from like 100K, 500K, 1 million followers. And from there, in her next promotion, she's like, okay, next chat funnel, I want to launch a new thing. I haven't done this yet. It's new. So I don't know if this is going to be the best move, but I do want to test this out. I clearly see the demand. And when she did that, she made $80,000 on that second chat funnel. So now she's way past the 6-figure mark in terms of revenue generation from this. But also, all those people have become leads on her email list, can become repeat buyers, and just continue to be a bigger part of her community.
Wow, that's like, you're talking about what Facebook ads used to be like when it was.
I love you're saying this.
Run
yes. Exactly.
It's not that. It's not really advertising anymore.
Yeah. And advertising in itself has become a whole other, it's very interesting. And I'm so curious to see what it ends up looking like as AI becomes just so much better at it. But the interesting thing about DMs is that they've really taken over our lives the last decade. Everyone now communicates with your mom, your colleagues, partners, even we connected on Instagram DM, right? So there's all these different messaging platforms. Everyone has their pick. And so that's also something cool to think about when it comes to investing your time into a new technology or tool, is that if you invest the time to learn and understand and use and try to master, or at least get results with Instagram DM and Facebook, which is where this is primarily available, then as YouTube opens up, X.com, LinkedIn, all these other places, you'll be able to apply the same principles because conversations at their core haven't changed very much since the beginning of time. It's ultimately always a back and forth. There's different, mechanisms and things that you can think about. But at the end of the day, like we all chat kind of the same that we do in text as you would if you're talking to somebody or on the phone or whatever have you. It's all just a back and forth. So the same principles from like the marketing and sales standpoint will apply to all the other channels. They're just different places people like to hang out.
Okay. So this seems easy to me only because I've already done this before. But there's also from me, my hesitation is like, are people going to get sick of this? But maybe eventually, but maybe it's how we use the platform too. You mentioned that 95% of people are doing these automations wrong. Can you explain what the common mistakes are? And if we haven't already discussed this.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about two of the most common mistakes, which are that they're using it more than 50% of the time or on all of their posts.
Right.
And also that they're using the same word every single time that they promote something. Now, the other things that people will tend to do is that they'll treat the posts that are using these comment call to actions like they immediately go out of valuable content creation mode and they go into like, how do I create an advertisement? And so naturally, that piece of content might do much more poorly than a regular piece of content because they didn't try to add as much value. They were like, I'm trying to get from this post. And the right way to do it is to say, hey, create a valuable and shareable, since that's really important these days, piece of content, and then add the call to action in subtly and thoughtfully into not just the end, but you can also leverage it in other parts of the post. So 3 other ideas for that are firstly, in the middle of your caption or the middle of your actual video, like let's say that you have a 60-second reel, you could throw in the call to action subtly so that it, makes sense with everything. And then you keep moving on with your points. So that's going to get you more people opting in because they may not stay until the end of the video. You can also, if you have a reel, rename your original audio to your comment call to action. So that can be a little piece of real estate that actually gets seen quite often on all the different views people view content on. So instead of original audio, it would say comment pitch or comment wild. Right. And then the third thing is how you are actually like showing it in the video when it comes to them seeing subtitles and then the actual like text that you're putting on the screen, depending on what type of piece of content it is. And so we always aim to have both text that has that call to action in addition to the subtitles that are there. So those are 3 easy things that people can implement like right off the bat. Even if I know you mentioned that like you can see yourself doing this, which means that I'm doing my job well, which means that you're like, hey, this makes sense to me. Like I want to go and try all these things that we're talking about, right? If you are at the very beginning of this process, this podcast is maybe one of the first times you've even heard the word ManyChat and you're like, this sounds really awesome, but I have no idea what to do. You could even start to test this out without automation, where you are testing out these places of where you're putting the comment call to action in those different places I mentioned. See if you get traffic. What I hope for you and what I tend to see is people like, oh my gosh, I got 100 comments, 200 comments. How am I going to get back to these manually? So then they might just say, hey, I'm going to try to do these. And then now I'm going to implement the automation because I'm seeing that mechanism is working well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Doing it kind of cut and paste is the best way to start. And that's what the Boards app does really well. I don't know if it's available for Android. Okay. So maybe you've mentioned this too, but the top 3 best practices you've discovered, especially recently, that are most critical to actually leveraging this tool properly.
Okay, top 3 best practices. There are so many that I want to share with your people right now. But the first is when it comes to the content cadence and how often you're promoting. We talked a little bit about how you want to be promoting in less than 30% of your total posts. So the way that actually plays out in practice is, let's say that you post at least 5 times a week, which might mean once a day, Monday through Friday. So during that time, we aim to have a minimum then of 2 posts in that cadence where you would have a comment call to action. And that allows you to spend time with a specific segment of your audience that is interested in that certain offer that you have to give them. So if you have, for example, 2 freebies, then what you might do is start to create a rotating cadence of, okay, if I'm not using the same word every single time I post as my comment call to action, and I'm trying to do this less than 30% of the time, I have 2 slots per week, if I'm posting 5 times a week, where I can promote something. And so during those, week 1 of that new calendar you're creating is to say, okay, I have my free guide that I want to give people. So in 2 of my posts for the week, make sure I have 2 posts in between the ones that have the comment call to action. Those are going to be ones where I'm giving a lot of value. It's very shareable, but I also have my comment call to action. Now, that freebie, I know we're getting a little deep and advanced here. Maybe for some people or others are like, I got this. So either way, just to kind of recap and go a level deeper for a moment, you want to think about your freebies that you are giving people or whatever offer it is that you're giving them in accordance to the reasons why someone followed you in the first place or why they want to come to your content. So if, let's say, for example, that I teach people how to start a podcast, there might be how to actually choose the equipment for the podcast. There might be how to get brands to sponsor your podcast. So those are 2 topics that I might want to know if I'm, wanting to learn podcast marketing and how to be a podcast host. So my first freebie would then be, okay, here's the equipment comment kit, for example, and I'll send you my whole podcast kit. That's your segment of both content and the call to actions you pick in week 1. Right now in week 2, you say, okay, now I'm going to let that audience do their thing. They've gotten value. They're still going to keep seeing those posts if they didn't already see them. Now in week 2, I'm going to focus on a different segment of my audience, related but different, which is how to get brand sponsors. And so now in that freebie for that week, I can then focus on that topic in both my content and then the actual comment call to action that I'm posting. And then if you only have those 2, then you just keep rotating again and again through those. As you start to build out your system, this is where you want to get to 3 to 5 of those. For our most advanced clients, they might have 30, 50, 200. I don't want that to overwhelm anyone. You can think about it in the sense that like there's different seasons of the business.
Yeah. I don't even post that many times in like 5 years.
Yep. So that's kind of how to think about the scheduling of this. Like, how do I do this so I don't burn people out? Not just from the tactical standpoint of like, don't post this too often, but also like, here's the week by week cadence. So that's the first one. The second one is choosing what offer you're actually going to give people. And I mentioned 2 freebies as examples in the first point. So giving people a freebie as the offer in your call to action is actually the highest performing thing that we have found. There is one account that we helped grow 1.4 million followers within 4 months. And during that time, and then after that, they have also now collected 250,000 new emails from those people engaging with their content. And what we found is that most of those are for a free download because people want to get a quick hit from the content. And then how do I take it a step further? Because if you're creating good content, you are solving a problem for somebody in that piece of content. And as we all know, as entrepreneurs, once you solve one problem, well, that solution opens up another problem. Let's say I have a lead problem. Well, once I start to get leads, okay, now maybe I've got a sales problem because I'm not converting these people the way I want to, and so forth. And it never ends, right? And that's the fun part about life and business. And so in terms of what you can do in your content is you are closing one loop in your content, and then you're opening up another loop by then solving that with a comment call to action. So that comment call to action being a freebie allows people to perceive it as, okay, this is a quick thing that I can get an answer for. Like, I'm excited to do that. Once they get into the conversation, they're now more committed. And every single touch point you have with them, it might only last 30 to 60 seconds for them to opt in, give you their email, all of that. But that creates a much stronger bond and relationship. And now we can have multiple invitations, like Elizabeth Benton's example I was giving you, which is where she had a freebie and then she had a $1,500 course upsell in the same conversation. That's where now you can add any other offer you want to on the back end. Or if you don't want to sell to people, you could just say, and by the way, if you haven't heard my latest podcast episode, I dive a little deeper into this topic here. Here's the link to Spotify, Apple, whatever.
Got you.
Does that all make sense so far? I know I went over a bit, but.
And then is it important for somebody to have the offer created already, or can this inspire the offer?
Yes, I would only recommend that this inspires the offer if you have more than 10K followers and or you get at least 10 genuine comments per post let's say on average, you might have some underperformers, but on average from people who are actually interested in the piece of content that seem to be your ideal avatars, not just your peers and your friends cheering you on or, existing customers. That's really important because if you don't have the traffic element, then it's not going to make sense for you to launch something new off of this. Instead, you want to find better ways to create more valuable content. And then if you have that offer or even a wait list for it in your link in bio, you should get enough traffic there to then see, okay, 30 people, 100 people maybe have said they're interested in this thing. Now I'm going to launch it and with an automation. So it's just about doing things in the right order. So you're like leveraging your energy and your resources in the best way, if that makes sense.
Right. I love it. Okay. So what are some of your predictions for the next 6 months to 2 years in this space?
Next 6 months to 2 years. So what's kind of fun now is that AI is more prevalent than it ever has been because it's been very present in this chatbot automation, messaging kind of space, but not at the level that it is now. And so my first prediction is that this concept of creating AI setters, which many companies are already working on, but being able to leverage that for companies that don't sell high ticket is a huge opportunity. And it's something that we are working on right now. So we have many clients we have a mix of all sorts of different clients, but specifically one segment of our audience, our clients only sell low ticket products that it would never make sense for them to have a sales team for. And my hypothesis, just seeing all the data we see, is that they're losing out on hundreds of millions of dollars collectively every single year by not having someone who is hopping into the DMs and helping serve people who could become a customer in 2, 3, 6 months, or could be a customer right now, but just didn't get that far. Something distracted them when they were, looking into a product and then they've never come back. And the only way right now that they can re-engage with those people is through their automated email sequences, which we all know that email open and click rates continue to decline year after year, and also retargeting ads. And so when it comes to being able to have a direct communication line, the DMs are one of the best places because you're getting 90% open rates, 70% click rates. It's an incredible channel right now. Like you said, Facebook ads back in, the earlier 2000s. And so this opportunity to have someone, an AI, represent you and your brand and have these back and forth sales conversations that aren't sales funnels, but are actual sales conversations is the next level of this game. But I see it stacked where people would opt into a funnel because you need to give people some direction and structure. You can't just be like, hey, chat with me about whatever, and I'll hopefully help you solve your problem. You do want to lead them down a structured path initially. So that's where we collect name, email, do the things we currently do. And then on top of that, how can we now follow up thoughtfully and in a personalized way to eventually sell them into your products or get them into the next step, with it also making sense at a low enough cost? Because right now, as you and many other people who are in your position know, appointment setters and building a sales team and all of that is a tough and challenging thing. And it may not make sense, again, for people who have lower ticket products. So that's one of my biggest predictions, that's going to become something that, Meta is working on a version of it, but I think it's going to come from an outside source of people who are building different versions of them for different niches, like fitness coaches, business development people, and all those kind of other aspects.
Wow, it's a lot. So a setter, AI setter, let's just define that very quickly too, just in case people don't know what that means.
Yeah. So an AI setter, the way that I would define that is if you think about an appointment setter, this person is calling your leads, engaging anyone who's coming in the door or filling out, an application to work with you in a more high ticket or services business. For low ticket products where you might be selling courses or something, let's say under $1,000, you might not have the margins or want to pay the margins to pay commission to somebody to sell these offers for you. So an AI setter would be an AI that can speak on your behalf and both sell your products for you as if they were a salesperson representing you, and even represent you as if it was you. And then also eventually help either replace or supplement human appointment setters so that then they can go and maybe talk to more challenging leads or more urgent situations or just hotter situations versus them having to handle all the different leads that are coming in the door. I hope that makes more sense.
So exciting.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack on that one. So
there is a lot.
That's the first time I've talked about it publicly too, since we're kind of working on it, underground. So you're like, what did you just say?
I know, what's going on? No, that's cool. I mean, Dan's team, he's got a big sales team. and these are young bucks that are doing their thing.
Yeah.
But he's all deep, deep, deep into this. He loves this stuff too. So, and the way he says it is that AI is not going to replace your job. The people using AI will replace your job. So
completely
try to be
agree.
the first to it. Try it. And if it fails, at least it's best it failed with a smaller following than it did if you had a larger following. That's what I say. It's like, go and just test it out.
Yes.
Sure, it's intimidating, but here, this is the future. It's happening now. And we may as well educate ourselves, train ourselves and our team on this. Like right now, I'm creating a whole PR department at an agency. And the first thing that we're doing is setting up all of their AI. So
Amazing.
How to use things like ChatGPT and Claude as the starting point to actually create strategy pitches. And it's like the table stakes right now. And it's not taking away our job. It's allowing our jobs to be more efficient.
Yes.
And we can do more things faster, better. Okay. This has all been a very quick mouthful of incredible information. But I have one last question for you. When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
It is to be free and confident to be who you are unapologetically, even in front of the people that you are most vulnerable with.
I love that.
And it took me a long time to get to that point, but I finally feel like I'm starting to embody that for myself, which is why that's what kind of comes to mind.
There you go. Well, it's perfect. Okay. Well, you have obviously a lot to share and some incredible resources online. So where can people go online to find you?
Yeah, so I put together something special just for the incredible women who are listening. And so if you go to Instagram and look up at Natasha T. Willis, which is my Instagram, Natasha T. Willis, then message me the word wild, and I will send you one of two resources depending on where you're at. If you're on the side of, okay, this all is really interesting, how do I just do the thing initially and set this up first? I will give you my ultimate guide completely free to actually setting this up, how we have done it for over 3,000 accounts. Or if you are already using it, so for example, if you're kind of similar to Renee's situation where you've set up a couple of things, you've been using it, but maybe it hasn't worked the way you wanted it to, or you're like, what more can I do with this? Hungry for more to really up-level this, then I will share a free training with you as well on how to exactly do that. Depending on what type of offer you have, it'll break down, all those things from both free things and paid things that you want to promote. And I hope that's useful to you.
I love it. So DM Natasha the word wild. Yay. It's a great choice of words. Well, this has been an incredible conversation. I'm definitely going to be jumping into my ManyChat right after this to fix some things. Well, Natasha, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure, such a joy, and thank you everyone for listening.